אנחנו נלמד עכשיו יחד שיעור של הרבש.
We are studying together with Rabash the study of the 10 Sefirot, volume 1, part 4,
דף רי"ג, אות ה'. רגע לפני
item 5.
המשותף נקרא מדברי הרב.
Before the study, we'll read from Rav's words that will aim us for the lesson.
שזה תלוי בזה שאתם תראו אותי כל הזמן.
I don't think it depends on you seeing me all the time.
את ההקלטות של הרבש, של כל
If I take the recordings of Rabash, all our lessons with him, or the conversations he had,
בין אם אני
I
נמצא
don't
לידו,
feel a difference
כי הוא חי לידי,
between being next to him, because when he was alive besides me, or listening to him through the recordings. It depends only on my intention.
מוכן.
But I am ready. So we're beginning with page 213, item 5. It says the following. There are no vessels prior to Akudim. Prior to the existence of Akudim, the upper light could not clothe in any vessel. That is because the vessels could not tolerate it. And the light did not clothe the vessels there until the expansion of that great light reached the phase of Akudim. Then the existence of a single vessel for that great light has been made. And there began a certain limitation of the light in Atzilut, which could not have been done thus far. So, what does it say here? That before Akudim, the lights could not clothe with the vessels. After Akudim was made, then a single vessel was formed, and then there was the limitation of the light, which could not be until Akudim was made. So, what is Akudim? This is what we need to learn, where there were no vessels yet. Item 5, inner light. Akudim. What is Akudim? Akudim are regarded as the 10 Sefirot of the Toch, of the first Partzuf of the reality that follows the first restriction, called Adam Kadmon. Prior to that, before the restriction, there was no Rosh Toch Sof in the upper light, but rather the upper light filled the entire reality. This is what the Ari says. I'm repeating it. What does it say up here? What is Akudim? Toch. What is Toch? We learned that about the Guf. He is being precise here. He says, before Akudim, meaning the Toch, before the Toch there was a Rosh. And then he explains that before that, it is already called Ein Sof.
No Rosh.
No Rosh. So we have to interpret it again. I'm repeating it again. Item 8. Akudim are regarded as the 10 Sefirot of the Toch, of the first Partzuf, in the reality that follows the first restriction. This Partzuf is called Adam Kadmon. This is why I'm saying Akudim, Toch. What does it mean? The first Partzuf that emerged after the restriction. Therefore, before the Toch, meaning in the Rosh, there was no limitation. So he brings it as evidence that I bring when I'm talking following the restriction. Because before the restriction, there was no matter of Rosh and Toch. And even with Akudim, it is known that it is called Toch. I'm talking about a Partzuf, which is after the restriction. It follows that before the Toch, meaning in the Rosh, there was no limitation yet. This is what he says afterwards. Diari writes, prior to the existence of Akudim, before the Toch, meaning in the 10 Sefirot in the Rosh of Adam Kadmon that precede the 10 Sefirot of Toch of Adam Kadmon, Ak, called Akudim, the upper light could not clothe in any vessel. This is thoroughly explained in part 3, that there is no discernment of a vessel in the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh, but only roots for the vessels. It follows, therefore, we said earlier that in the Rosh, the inner light and the surrounding light are one light, whereas where do they begin to be distinguished, to be separated? In the Guf, where there is limitation already. Then it limits. This is called inner light, and what goes outside is called surrounding light. Now we need to begin item 9. Before the existence of Akudim, the upper light could not clothe in any vessel. Now, item 9 below. So he explains. What it means is, this refers to the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh of Ak, that the vessels can, because before there was no ability in the vessels to tolerate it. So why? So he explains, item 9. The reflected light that rises from Malchut upward is not regarded as a vessel of reception for the upper light, but only as a root for a vessel of reception. As we learned, that by making the calculation in the Rosh of the degree, he can later receive. Thus, as much as Malchut of the Rosh expands and broadens to 10 Sefirot from her and within her, by the reflected light that overturns and descends from above downwards, it is considered that he does not receive necessarily. There are no vessels there at all. It is so because the reflected light rises there from below upward. And any clothing from below upwards indicates, below means the lower one that receives, and above means the bestower. When I say that the light comes from the receiver to the bestower, it indicates departure from reception, that we don't want to receive. If the lower one doesn't want to receive, this is considered from below upwards, whereas if he doesn't clothe anything, so why do you call it clothing from below upwards? So he explains the reason we call it clothing is that the 10 Sefirot connect there and become a root for the clothing. This is why, so on the one hand, it is the root for the clothing, so the calculation that he makes in the Rosh that later on he can receive in the body it follows that this is considered the root of the true clothing. But the root of the clothing, he calls it clothing from below upwards, so that the receiver gives to the bestower. What is called guf, body, that he receives it from above, from the bestower down to the receiver. This is called clothing, that he already receives. The receiver is called vessels. This is as the Rav Diari writes, that the vessels could not tolerate it in the Rosh. The vessels did not want to receive. The vessels wanted just Malchut. The connection is that because he doesn't want to receive, only on the condition that it is in order to bestow, then he'll be able to receive it later. That's clear. 10. What does it say? Look above. There. The light could not clothe in the vessel until the expansion of that great light reached the face of Akudim, and there a single vessel was formed. Now let's go down to item 10. Until Malchut and the reflected light with her extend the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh to the Toch, meaning this is called from above downwards. Then a single vessel was made, meaning the vessel of Malchut. She expanded, broadened, and received the entire amount of light inside her. The 10 Sefirot of Rosh, meaning as much as was in the Rosh, which is considered in potential, that he said as much as he was able to receive in order to bestow, it was only in potential. But now he receives it in actuality. So he says these 10 Sefirot are called the descent from above downwards and expand in the vessel of Malchut that broaden. He says these are called the 10 Sefirot of Akudim, or the world of Akudim. So what is Akudim? Precisely from the Peh downwards. What is in the Rosh is he cannot yet call it Akudim. And he says, and then Akudim started, then Atzilut began to have the ability to limit the light. Because Malchut is the sof of that vessel, which is regarded as the Malchut of the vessel of Malchut. She stands in the taboo. She limits the upper light on its path from expanding from hair downwards. The force of that limitation of the Malchut that lets it to expand from hair down, which she makes a sof, an end, is called by the name of tabur or chazeh, and from there below it's already called the sof of the degree. What is the sof, the end? I don't want to receive. This is as he says that I want to receive. This is called sof, end. It follows that there can be a limitation of the light. This is what I receive, this is what I do not, which could not be so far until Akudim. Item 30, meaning that although Malchut of the Rosh also limits the upper light, we learned that in the Rosh it says this is what he will receive, this is what he will not receive, which is why a coupling by striking occurred there. So why do you say that this limitation is done actually in the guf, in the toch? Indeed, this limitation and this reflected light, nevertheless, this limitation and this reflected light of Malchut of Rosh are not regarded as actual limitation, but only as potential limitation. The Keter is like a primeval substance containing only the root of the four elements, but in potential, not in actual fact. It is therefore possible to call it Ein Sof and emanator, referring to the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh, called Keter. What he says that this is called, what he calls Keter means emanator, refers to the Keter of the Rosh. We learn the rule that every degree is divided into 5 phases. The Rosh of every degree is called the Keter. From the Peh to the Chazeh of every degree, it's called Chokhmah. From the Chazeh to the Tabur, it is called Binah. And from the Tabur downwards, it is called Zeranpin and Malchut. This is why he says, what he says there, that Keter is called Ein Sof, which is only in potential, not in actuality. He refers to the Rosh of the degree. If we're talking about the fact that he received nothing, therefore we could call it Ein Sof. We could also call it Shoresh, a root for the 4 foundations or phases. What is the root? By making a calculation, a limitation in potential. He will receive that, but he will not receive this. Therefore, later on, there is the actuality of what to receive in actuality, what not to receive in actuality. It follows that the limitation of the vessels that the Rav refers to is specifically in the Guf, but the root of it was also in the Rosh, but we do not actually receive there. This is why he says that in the Rosh there is no limitation. He says there in part 2. Answer 43. The question was, what is a screen? And so he says the following. And the main question is, what is the difference between the screen and the restriction? So he says the following. This is answer 43. The force of the restriction that emerges in the emanated being towards the upper light to stop it on its way from descending to phase 4, meaning that from the moment that it reaches and touches phase 4, and phase 4 is considered receiving in order to receive, immediately this force awakens. Which one? And it strikes it and repels it backwards. What does it say here? The force of the restriction that awakens in the emanated being when it reaches him towards the upper light that he extended it, let's say, and it touches phase 4 in reception in order to receive, immediately this force awakens, the force of restriction, and strikes this light and repels it backwards. This force is called screen. And you should denote the difference between the state of the screen that is in the emanated being and the state of restriction within him. These are two completely separated matters, because the force of restriction done over phase 4 is directed towards the vessel in the emanated being, which is the yearning to receive. This means that because of the desire to equalize its form with the emanator, it detained itself from receiving during this yearning to receive. Because the yearning within him, called phase 4, is an upper force. His desire to actually do good to his creations operates in the lower one a desire and a yearning to receive pleasure and delight, since the emanated being cannot cancel it or diminish it a little bit, but he can only detain himself, not to want to receive, even though he greatly yearns it. Let's say while fasting, during fasting, you're forbidden to eat, so he can't say that his body will not be hungry because it's forbidden to eat. He's not the master of that, but only what the master what he can do is not to let it eat. But the desire itself, he's not the master of it to say whether he's hungry or not hungry. This force of detainment to not let it always resides over phase 4 in the emanated being. When is it relevant to say that he detains his desire? He's hungry, but it doesn't let it eat. But if he's not hungry and you let it eat anyway, he doesn't have any yearning for eating. So when it is relevant to say that he detains, when he has a desire to receive. This is why he says that his force of detainment always resides over phase 4 in the emanated being, except when he draws new light, then he necessarily must cancel this force of detainment, meaning the restriction in him. So then he uses the yearning, and this yearning for the upper light appears in him. By using the yearning, then he has the power to draw the light to him. Therefore, he canceled the restriction, so as not to use it, not to eat. And he says, yes, he does want to eat. He does draw the light. And here, after he canceled the restriction and he drew the light, the operation of the screen in the emanated being begins, because every yearning draws the upper light in wholeness as it was in Ein Sof, since it is an upper force, and the lower one has no control over it to diminish it. Therefore, the light comes down in order to fill phase 4. However, at that moment, when the light touches phase 4, immediately the screen awakens and it strikes the light and repels it backward. Because he wants equivalence of form. It follows by that he only receives, but only the light of the 3 phases, meaning in order to bestow. And phase 4, which is called in order to receive, does not receive it. Thus, you see that the operation of the screen applies only when light arrives. After the force of the restriction was cancelled for some time. What does that mean, for some time? In order to draw new light, as explained. And the operation of the restriction is eternal, constant, to detain himself to not draw light. Thus, the restriction and the screen are 2 completely separated discernments. And you should know that the screen is a consequence of the restriction. Here too he says that every phase receives the phase or the quality of Ein Sof, and we should say that every phase receives from Ein Sof, meaning just as in Ein Sof he was shining to the receiver in order to receive, in the same way every phase wants to receive in order to receive, as it was in Ein Sof. So why? Because this phase, this discernment is in control, but what we need to know is what to receive. In that, there is a distinction between the lower one to the upper one. Each one sees what there is to receive. But here, we're talking in a way that it's all about the relation. And the relation is that each and every degree wants to receive from his will to receive, which comes to him from the side of the world of Ein Sof, which is called his desire to do good to his creations, which was shining also to his vessels of reception. Therefore, immediately the force of restriction, called the screen, awakens. And he doesn't receive it because of what he in what he wants, but only in the three phases, meaning he makes a calculation of how much he's able to receive so as not to blemish the restriction. What was the restriction? Equivalence of form. He wants to be in equivalence of form and receive in such a way. This is called the Rosh of the degree. And then comes this limitation, which was in potential, not that he received or that he did not receive, but only down below when he begins to receive. This is called the goof. Then we say that there is a limitation on the vessel. It follows that what the Ari says above, that as the Ari says, that then after the light expanded in the goof of the Partuf called Akudim, then this is from the pen below. Then there began to be some limitation of the light. Where was that? In Akudim, called from pen below, which could not have been thus far. In the Rosh of the degree, there was a limitation, but it was in potential. It's not that he received or did not receive. But in actuality, it begins in the goof. This is called in actuality. This is what I received, this is what I do not. Then a vessel is formed. So this means that before Akudim, the Malchut of the Rosh expanded and received. This is called the Sefirot of Akudim. This is where Malchut received. This means that the limitation started because the Kli is called Toch, and limitation means the Sof. So, what she received only in potential, she can actually receive it. From where do we start talking about the vessels? Only in Akudim, which is called the Guf. So the question is the following. If we make a rule that all the Sefirot are extended from the world of Ein Sof, as we learned there about the four phases of direct light, those same qualities apply once and for all, meaning that there are three phases, which we call the first 9, since phase 3 includes 6 phases. This is why we call them the first 9. And this is considered light. Why? Since the phase of the receiver was not yet born, receiver in order to receive, so it will be a phase in and of itself. And the first time that this phase appeared, so this phase is considered the root of the emanated beings. This means that this Malchut is the one that attains. And before this Malchut, there is no attainment. And this was done later also, even though what we were talking about was in the world of Ein Sof. Why? Because there is no light without a vessel. Who says that there is? Who can say that there is light? One who attains it. If no one attains it, who knows what exists? Therefore, how can we talk about the 10 Sefirot? We should be talking only from Malchut onwards. So he says that after Malchut emerged, then we can talk about the first time, meaning what Malchut attains, her elements, the things that made Malchut emerge. It follows that the first 3 phases, called the first 9, right? Those 3 phases, Malchut attains how they are. It follows that phase 4 within phase 4, this is her own phase, which is called the yearning to receive in order to receive. And who created that? The desire to bestow. His desire to do good to his creations created this vessel that attained the first 9. Which are called 3 phases. It is considered the 3 phases in Malchut. So now Malchut has 4 phases. And why before that, above Malchut, we don't know. What do we know? What she attained. This is what we are talking about. Therefore, which phase wants to does she want to restrict? Her own phase, which is called phase 4 within phase 4. Whereas the 3 phases that she attained, they are only vessels of bestow. This is not yet regarded as receiving in order to receive. Therefore, when there was a restriction, the light had to depart only from phase 4 within phase 4. And the 3 phases that she attained, it should have remained. What is phase 4 within phase 4? Receiving in order to receive. And what she attained is that there are 3 phases. Malchut attained that as well.
But how can she?
Well, she attained that the Sefirah of Chokhmah is entirely to bestow. She attained that the Sefirah of Binah is a little bit more of the Ma. She attained in Zeranpin is a little bit more, because she attained it. What did she attain? That he is the receiver and he is the giver. We don't say that. She attained herself, that she is the receiver in order to receive. She attained that in the first 9, they do not become separated from the emanator. Where do we become separated from the emanator? In the receiving, in order to receive. This is why we don't want to receive in order to receive.
So he's asking, accordingly, light should have come out from what? From the phase 4 within phase 4, the phase 3 in 4, attained vessels of bestowal. So if the light lets divide, if that degree attained it, the degree can only have 3 phases should come first over 3 phases. Therefore, she extended the light again for over 4 phases. But how much she attained is called wholeness. Not how much came, but how much she attained. Again, before she attained all 4 phases. That teaches us to divide. That's why it has to depart. The light has to depart from 4 phases. And then she extended the light again in wholeness, which awakens the yearning and comes to the vessel of reception. Only when the light comes over all 4 phases, the force of restriction awakened, and she made a screen. And she said, I don't want to receive the phase 4 of itself, called receiving in order to receive, even though I have great yearning from the side of the emanator. She wants equivalence of form. This means that the force of restriction awakened in her, called a screen, Masach. And what did the screen do? Seemingly calculation. How much you can receive from this in order to bestow. We call these 3 qualities, meaning what he does, it's bestow, but not as it was there the three phases, but only the difference, as I said before. Before that, Malchut received three phases, which are vessels of bestowal, and its own quality, or she had its own quality, its own phase, and she also attained those who created it, who caused her to be. Now, who received them, who attains them? They say in order to bestow. Therefore, if I say in order to bestow is called in us as reflected light. The lower one wants to bestow to the upper one. Where did he get this power from? From the screen that detained it from receiving in order to receive. Except here, there's an addition of what was not there before, meaning we are speaking generally, that we're not saying that the three phases it received from the overall light, and the phase 4 did not receive, except we learn it differently. If she's not receiving in order to receive, only she receives as much as she can bestow. In how much she can bestow, there are many discernments there. Again, what we have, these many worlds and many partsufim, who gives, who does this to us? The screen, as much as we can bestow, it gives us many discernments. That's why when we study generally the three phases, it doesn't mean anything yet. How much can she receive in three phases? This is what you should ask, you understand? So what's it about? We use vessels of reception with the will to receive. Therefore, we use what? Not the three phases, the vessel of reception. Rather, just as the three phases say that they are not considered vessels of reception, now the Malchut that makes reflected light, it's on the three phases, but it's not three phases, it's Malchut. Three phases are called light without a kli, without a vessel. Therefore, the definition of the three phases need explanation here, not something abstract, 3 and 4, or I'll take 1, 3, I'll take 3. This is only language. From this language, many things are intuited, things that we need to scrutinize them, and we need to clarify. What is toch? She says, I want to receive because I wish to bestow. This is called toch. This is called inner light. Until it comes to the Malchut of Sof, as we learned, Malchut of toch, called tabur, which is called the reality of limiting the light. If so, what does the Sof say? I don't want to receive. Why? Because I want adhesion. They say as long as he says he doesn't want, because of the light of Hasadim, then there's the light of Hasadim there with the illumination of Chokhmah. That's what you have there. She attains it in the Toch. There's a Chokhmah, actually. Why does she say that she wants to receive? And here you only have illumination by wanting and not wanting to receive. And because of adhesion, she receives. What do you want to add on that? We learned 4 phases of direct light. What did we learn that we call Bina? Chokhmah, in its end, after receiving the light, then the branch wants to resemble its root. So it does not want to receive, it doesn't want to, it wants adhesion. For that, she received the light of Chasadim. Then we learned there was the light of Chasadim with the illumination of Chokhmah called Zer Anpin. Why? Bina saw that without Chokhmah, you cannot live. Why? His desire to do good to his created beings was on the light of Chokhmah. Abiyah desires equivalence of form. That is why it seemingly invented this compromise to receive the light of Chasadim and a little bit of Chokhmah, called an illumination of Chokhmah. And later came another push from above. His desire to do good to his created beings was not in Zer Anpin, only broadly, and she doesn't have it. That's why she went and she extended the light broadly, called the light that fills all of reality, even phase 4 in 4 as well. After receiving the light, like Chokhmah in its end, awakened again in equivalence of form to make a compromise like Bina. It doesn't work. She found a new invention. She will not receive in order to receive, not receive called restriction, only in order to bestow. She went and she extended the light in return, so she can receive it in order to bestow, which is what we call a line and a screen from below up. Turns out, who made the restriction? Malchut, that is called the receiver. In order to receive, she went and extended this light. What light? In order to bestow. Except it doesn't want it, it's called a restriction. If she does want it, it's called extension. This is the whole thing, that he who gives, if so, it comes out from the root of the screen. So we learn that the force of restriction that awakened is called a screen, and this gives you the strength, the force. What did we learn? After surrounding light came and canceled this force, then it doesn't have the power to overcome. It says that it goes up to the Rosh of the degree, where this force still exists, and it receives again the power to overcome, the force to overcome, since she lacks the records. And he receives the force to overcome on a smaller degree. So who gives the power? The restriction. Indeed, these words of the Ari are deeper than deep. We need to understand them, since we must understand them, for they pertain to the very root of the wisdom and its beginning. We must determine the difference between potential and actual that the Ari speaks of. He divides between the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh that clothe the reflected light from below upward, and the 10 Sefirot of the Guf that clothe the reflected light from above downward. It is for that reason that the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh are sometimes called, from the fact that they go from below up, sometimes they're called Ein Sof and Emanator to the 10 Sefirot of the Guf. And what's the difference? There is a great difference in distance between the reflected light that rises from the screen in Malchut upward, from below up, clothing the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh, and the reflected light that descends with the direct light from the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh down to the Guf. It appears that they are opposite from one another, because the reflected light that rises from below upward, not only is it not regarded as a vessel of reception for the clothing direct light, but it even has in it resistance to reception. It is so because any from below upward means that the light turns to the emanator and not to the receivers. Again, from above it's called, from below it's called receiver, from above the bestower, from below up, the receiver wants to offer this light to the emanator. He doesn't want to receive this light. However, the ascending reflected light still becomes clothing for the upper light. In other words, it becomes the root for the attachment of the upper light to the emanated being. Since the vessel of Malchut, of the Rosh, which raised that reflected light, is expanded and broadened by it from her and within her, and becomes a vessel of reception called the guf of the Partzuf. It is so because the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh descend from above downward and expand and clothe from the bestower to the receiver, and expand and clothe within her, meaning she attains it. You see that although from the perspective of their own quality, the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh depart from coming into the vessel of reception, as this is the meaning of reflected light that rises from below upward, meaning to the emanator and not to the emanated beings. Nevertheless, all the light that is actually received in the guf is only from the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh that expand in it from above downward, as explained below. He explains to us that we should distinguish in the Rosh two discernments. One, the light comes to Malchut and she doesn't want to receive it. She rejects it. In this sense, I can say that all of the light rises from below up, meaning all the light from below up, upward. Later, we say another thing. She makes a calculation how much she can receive in order to bestow. And she says, I can receive this. And the other one, I cannot receive. Meaning what I cannot aim in order to bestow, that I should not receive. In that sense, there is, on the one hand, she doesn't want to receive anything. Later, you make a calculation what you can receive, but you haven't received yet. That's why we say that with this screen that rejects the light, we can discern two phases, two aspects. On the one hand, she doesn't receive anything, and on the other hand, she says that she can receive it. It makes us think that later she goes and receives. The fact that she goes and receives in practice, in actuality, means where does it come from? From the potential. If so, we should discern. She received or did not receive in the Rosh. There's no wonder in the Rosh there was an action where she could not receive. What do we call a Rosh? Rosh is the root from which something is extended. If it's negative, why is it extended from the negative? From that, it's extended from the calculation that she made where she does receive from below up. So he says here that the Rosh is called Ein Sof, and the emanator, why? There is someone who attains it. So he speaks from the Creator, whereas the Guf already receives something. We should talk about the created being. For this reason, the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh are considered to have 10 potential Sefirot, but not actual. It means that the actual clothing of the light in the vessels is not at all in the Rosh, but only the potential and the root from which this clothing will be extended. That is why the Rosh is called Ein Sof or Keter. I conclude what it says at the end of the page on the column 1. Therefore, we can call the Rosh Ein Sof an emanator. Before that, the lot begins in Etz Chaim below. That the Keter is the primeval matter. That the Keter is like a primeval matter that has all the root of all 4 foundation or 4 elements in practice and not in actuality. What is in the Rosh? It's in potential. The Rosh is the root for the Guf. Therefore, he ends by saying you can call the Rosh Ein Sof an emanator, meaning there is still no created being there. Who is the created being? The receiver who attains. There's no one who attains. That's what Ari says. And there he says, then, meaning after the light expanded in the Guf of the Parzuf called Akudim, the existence of a single vessel, for that there has been a great certain limitation of the light in it, which could not have been done thus far. It means that before the Akudim, meaning in the Malchut of the Rosh, there could not be any limitation there, because when Malchut limits and raises reflected light in the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh, this limitation is actual bestowal. Since the greater the limitation, the greater the measure of bestowal. Because the limitation of phase 4 extends the level of Keter, and a smaller limitation, meaning only on phase 3, extends only the level of Chokhmah. Thus, no limitation is discerned in the Rosh whatsoever. It's a little difficult. We said, what is limitation in the Guf? Now the screen of Tabu says, I don't want to receive any more. What is limitation in the Rosh? The same thing. It's how much I can receive. This I can aim in order to bestow, and this I cannot aim. He wants to say that limitation meaning the screen. The screen is called limitation. So he says the main limitation is to do in practice. In potential, what in potential will later expand in actuality, you find that this limitation is called bestowal. We lack a little bit of clarification on it. So we have to start item 40. Even though you don't see the 10 lights, only after the end of Akudim. What is the meaning only after the end of Akudim? We'll see item 40 below. Meaning only after the 2 Parzufim, Ab and Sag of Ak, emerged and were revealed. When the light entered and departed the vessel 10 times, and these entrances and exits created and distinguished the 10 separate lights, as will be explained. Certainly, that the force of these 10 lights, only because there was no light in them in the beginning, because the light was not limited in the vessel, it was not, its presence or reality was not apparent. What is the matter here? What does he want here? The Ari wants to tell us, since according to the rule, the lights divide according to the vessels. If he says Akudim means that there is no more than a single vessel, how can we discern 10 lights if there is no more than a single vessel? So he says that it was in potential. And when is it apparent in those 10 lights? Only after the end, the completion of Akudim. Since Akudim, also there is no more Akudim. Even the completion of Akudim, he explains what is the completion of Akudim. Look at item 40, meaning
only after the two Partzufim, Ab and Sag of Ak, emerged and were revealed. Galgalta, Ab, Sag, those are called Akudim. There was only a single vessel. So, what is the free give it? So he says that the light, when the light entered and departed the vessel 10 times, and these entrances and exits created and distinguished the 10 separate lights, as it will be explained later. He says the following. In the Parzuf of Galgalta, there was a single vessel. And in the Parzuf of Ab, there was also one vessel, but it was present and not present. Whereas in the Parzuf Galgalta, it wasn't present and not present, meaning the light departed. And when it departed, when it exited from the Te'amim, and there was the clash of the inner light and surrounding light, the refinement of the screen began. The screen was refined, and afterwards the light did not come back. Whereas in the Parzuf of Ab, it is called present and not present. The light departed, and then the light came back, as we will learn later. And in the Parzuf of Sag, he says that there is permanent, present and not present. After the Malchut of Sag departed, again the Keter of Sag begins. This is why there are 10 exits and 10 entrances, even though there is only one vessel there. But it was sufficient for him to say that there would be a distinction of 10 lights. Above. Indeed, of course, the force of or the potential of these 10 lights was in them to begin with. Item 50 below. This is before they expanded to Akudim, meaning in the 10 Sefirot of the Rosh, where the 10 Sefirot are only in potential and not in actuality. So he says there that in the Rosh of Sag, there were also 10 Sefirot in potential. And it wasn't apparent, but only in potential. Let's look further. Only because the light was not limited inside the vessel. So in item 60 it says, this limitation that Malchut limits up to here, it is allowed to receive the light, and from here onwards it is forbidden, and I will no longer receive, begins to manifest only through a coupling by striking, and the ascent of reflected light from below upwards. In the second look that comes after the clothing of the light in the emanated being, meaning after Akudim. However, the light is not limited by the first look of in Malchut of the Rosh. And remember that. And in part 5, in item 23, the Ari says, these 4 phases are the existence of the 4 letters of Havaya. So he explains, why is it so? Because you know already that in the name Havaya, it starts only from Chokhmah and below. And he explains in inner light, Havaya starts only from Chokhmah downwards, as it is known that the Yud means Chokhmah, the Vav means Zeranpin, the first Hey means Binah, and the last Hey means Malchut. But the Keter is not implied in those 4 letters, but only in the tip of the Yud. So why does the Ari, why? The Ari says there in item 24 that it is letters. He says the following in item 24. And the reason is that down below in the 10 Sefirot, in the 9 Sefirot, from Chokhmah and below, they have 4 deficiencies for the light. And this in itself causes calling this name in the upper light so that it can be called by the name Havaya, those 4 deficiencies. Therefore follows that the te'amim of the Parzuf of Galgalta, the coupling that was in the Rosh, expands to the Guf. This is what he says here. This limitation begins to manifest only through a coupling by striking and the ascent of reflected light from below upwards in the Rosh.
נעבור לקרוא בזוהר לעם.
We're going to go